unit. First, a little housekeeping. We are in listen only mode, so please make sure your mic is muted. If you're having Wi Fi issues, you may want to turn off your camera and any other programs you may have running. Please make note of the chat feature in either the upper right hand or lower right hand of your screen. Please be sure to use chat for communications as we are not taking questions by audio. Isabel Rogers of Dewberry is monitoring the chat and will try to help you with technical matters. Please be sure to post to everyone when using the chat. We are offering 1 hour of continuing education credit for CFMs. To receive the credit, you must be logged in separately, answer all poll questions during this session, and provide your name and email at the end of the presentation. Poll questions should appear as a pop-up on the screen, but may appear in the chat box. If you're having issues answering the questions, please check that chat box and use the radio buttons to respond. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees, along with also a survey link will be provided at the end of the presentation. We appreciate you completing the survey so that we may improve these webinars in the future. We are recording today's webinar and plan to post the video to georgiadfirm.com. With that, let's get started. Today we have a presentation about Resilience Blueprint, putting resilience in the hand of Georgia community officials. Our presenter is Jarrett Matley. Jarrett is a senior project manager based in Dewberry's Atlanta office with 18 years of experience supporting GIS and water resources projects. And with that, I'll now turn it over to Jarrett.
All right, thank you, Emily. So I'm going to be introducing you all to Georgia's Resilience Blueprint, which is a new resource that has become available for Georgia communities, initially on a limited availability basis. I'm going to hop off of the camera, but I'll come back on the camera as we get to questions down the road. All right, so before I roll out the Resilience Blueprint, it helps to have a little bit of background history on where we've been and where we're going with our risk map projects in Georgia. So what you can see here on the map in dark green are the risk map project areas that we've completed to date. In the light green are areas that we have in various stages of progress. And so this is kind of pertinent to the data sets that I'm going to be speaking to today, where the Resilience Blueprint has limited coverage currently, but as far as the data sets that we'll be rolling out or that I'll be talking about, the areas in dark green should have access to many of these data sets, and which can be downloaded through FEMA's M.A.P Service Center, MSC. For the areas in light green, you'll be getting these products, but at various timelines down the road, depending on where you are in our existing workflow. So FEMA and Georgia's risk map goals include delivering quality flood risk information to communities that help with not just determining whether you're in or out of the floodplain, but also help with increasing public awareness and encouraging local and regional mitigation action. So the MAP part of risk map is an acronym. So that stands for mapping, assessment, and planning. So to help with those goals, as a part of a risk map revision, we look to update and roll out 2 sets of products. The first of which hopefully most of the folks on the line are familiar with is the traditional regulatory products, the flood insurance rate map panels, the flood insurance study report, and the firm database. And so those are the traditional regulatory products used for making development decisions to avoid placing new construction in high-risk flood hazard areas, or at least that they're built above that. And it's also used for the mandatory purchase requirement for flood insurance. As part of risk map, we have a secondary set of products, which previously used to have a map report and database component as well. The secondary set of products are non-regulatory. We refer to them as the flood risk data sets. Those are what I'm going to largely be talking about today. Those products, not too many years ago, FEMA did a stakeholder assessment to better understand the value of the report and map, and it was determined that those were maybe a little less useful to communities. And so those have kind of been deprecated to where communities have received them, they're still able to access those through FEMA's M.A.P Service Center. But now, moving forward, those flood risk products are just a geospatial database and data set. And that's honestly where the true power of those non-regulatory products fell. And those are intended to support mitigation activities in your communities. Um, but that being the strength of these data sets, being that they're GIS based, you can overlay them with different GIS layers that you have in your community and zoom in and out to them and get additional information about flood risks and vulnerability in your community. Um, there's also a weakness in that for communities where one of the biggest challenges that we find after going out to communities and rolling out these products is that they are GIS based. And GIS software can be very costly for, Esri ArcGIS software licensing can be very expensive. There are alternatives, even free versions of different GIS applications, but those may come with limited ability, limited support. They may not be as straightforward or easy to use, and so forth. The other weakness in these products is that they have a complicated data structure. That's gotten a little bit more streamlined and easier to understand, less complicated in the data sets that we create over time, but there are a lot of different layers and attributes and data linkages in these data sets that can be a challenge to grasp and fully understand what you're receiving. And then the application of these data sets can be very ambiguous. Once you understand them, how can you put the depth grids or changes since last firm to use to support mitigation activities? And so that's what brings us to the resilience blueprint, which I'll go over in the following slides. But this is essentially a curated platform that looks to leverage those flood risk data sets in the state and portray them in a way that communities can interact with them without GIS, just with a web connection and internet browser, and hopefully use the information that's being provided for planning and mitigation decisions. So it's a collection of online maps and dashboards and story map exhibits. And so I've got a direct link here directly to the resilience blueprint, but if you have georgiadfirm.com bookmarked, you can go directly to it through there as well. And I'll show you how to do that because I really hope that all of you have georgiadfirm.com already bookmarked. So once you get here on the homepage, if you go to Community Officials and then this Data Information Portal tab, and then you scroll down, we've got some program galleries. You want to go to the Resilience and Mitigation Program Gallery. And then you'll find that the Resilience Blueprint is embedded on this page, as well as if you scroll down, there's additional information for related websites and links and information about these flood risk data sets that I'll be discussing. And then if you click on this banner, it will pop out the resilience blueprint so into sort of a full screen mode, if you will. All right. So the resilience blueprint is intended to support mitigation actions in the community, and that can fall within any number of mitigation strategies. So I mentioned that it currently has limited coverage. It is, for the most part, there are a couple layers that go beyond this, but a couple map viewers that go beyond this, but it is for the most part limited currently to the Upper Oconee watershed. And that just happens to be where we rolled it out with that project. And their data set was sort of tailored to fit in these viewers. The communities in dark green will have a lot of these data sets in varying forms, but sometimes the formats have changed over the years, and it may not fit squarely in this viewer immediately. So there would be a little bit of prep that would need to be done. So it's possible that we could turn our attention to trying to get as much of that historical information into here, but like a lot of these things, we try and keep an eye on what's ahead of us and start building from there. And before we know it, we've got quite a bit more coverage. And so the next areas that we are going to look to incorporate into the resilience blueprint would be in the light green and light blue, those project areas that are in various states of our workflow. And then specifically next up in line is the Withlacoochee Little that we're already underway with trying to get the data formatted and created and hope to be integrating into the resilience blueprint very soon. And so we'll roll that out and introduce this to those communities as part of our resilience meeting activities. So that brings us to our poll question. Which I will read. And this is necessary if you want CEC credits, continuing education credits for your CFM. And so if you would answer this in your, there should be a pop-up on your screen within the Teams interface, or there should be the question present in the chat session. So you would select the yes or no button. The question is, the flood risk products include a non-regulatory set of GIS-based data sets that can be downloaded from FEMA's M.A.P Service Center where they are available. And there's no wrong answer. So just respond to get your credit. All right, so I think, Isabel, do we have the majority of the respondents?
Yep, it looks like we have 39 responses, 87 or 88 now say yes, and 12% say no.
Okay, perfect. So the answer is yes. The flood risk products do include, and moving forward, will be limited to a non-regulatory set of GIS-based data that can be accessed and downloaded from the M.A.P Service Center. So as I said in an earlier slide, if you've gone through a risk map revision for your community, these data sets, while they may not be on the resilience blueprint, they are available for you to download from that M.A.P Service Center website and integrate with your local GIS. All right, so we'll close that poll and we'll keep moving with the presentation. All right, so I'm going to introduce you to the various ins and outs of the resilience blueprint, but I'm going to do that through the data itself. And so I'm going to kind of go through the various data sets, introduce those, what they are, very briefly, and maybe talk about their uses, and then I'll pivot to the website where appropriate. So we'll start out with the changes since last firm, where this is a data set that we create over the course of a risk map project where we take the old effective flood hazards and the new proposed flood hazard information, we splice them together, and that allows us to highlight the horizontal changes in the floodplain as a result of our risk map revision. So typically, the symbology could be anything you want, but typically we use red to signify an increase and green to signify a decrease in the horizontal floodplain. So this could be useful in any number of applications for looking at critical facilities. So it's not just the 100-year changes that are in that changes since last firm layer, but also the 500-year changes as well as floodway changes. So it could be used to assess the placement of new critical facilities or used to assess how existing critical facilities are protected from existing floodplains. You could also look at the access points to those critical facilities and see if there's a secondary access point in the case that the primary is flooded or potentially inundated from a severe event. You can also use the changes since last firm to inform open space preservation projects, looking at large areas of increase in the special flood hazard area where maybe there's undeveloped land, and seeing if there's a way to preserve those areas in order to preserve the natural floodplain. And that could be something like turning those lands into some sort of a park or amenity for surrounding neighborhoods to enjoy, That would be really good use of floodplain, in that there would be minimal issues or damage if there was flooding in that area. So that brings us to the first viewer, which is the changes since last firm dashboard. So I'll pivot to the website, and you've got a collection on the homepage. You've got a collection of these tiles that'll take you to the various viewers and dashboards that we have, and the changes since last firm is down here. Now, once you've gone into a viewer, up at the upper left, you'll see this little 4 square icon. You can click on that and it'll take you right back to the home page, landing page of the Resilience Blueprint. Now, if you click on something else and you go into it, once you're in the map viewer, you'll see that all those tiles get strewn across the top here in sort of a tabbed format. So you can find those different dashboards up here as well. So here's the changes since last firm dashboard again. So we'll go ahead and go to it. And we will take a look at Oconee County. So you've got to select your community initially to get started here. So the initial county starts to hone in on the information that's being shown, where it zooms to the county layer, and then you get some countywide change statistics that resulted from our risk map project. So you can see countywide in Oconee County that there were 5 structures that were newly added to the special flood hazard area, 7 that experienced an increase in that special flood hazard area from the prior effective, 7 that had a decrease, and then 50 that were newly removed from that special flood hazard area. So this next column correlates with this second selection. So we'll go to Watkinsville. So the first was the countywide. First column is the countywide statistics, but now we've honed in on one of the communities, and so we can compare and contrast how Watkinsville compared to the countywide totals. You can also filter by unincorporated areas of the county as well, if you wanted to. And then the color coding corresponds to the symbology on the map, where you can see the building footprints and those changes in flood hazard information shown here. So you can see the building footprints that had a decrease in green that were actually newly removed, and that correlates with these values. So if you don't like the base map that's being shown, you can always change that up here. So we'll switch to imagery, and then you can better zoom into those particular properties and better assess what's going on. All right, so the next data sets that we'll go into are the depth, water surface, elevation, and probability grids. And these are often, I think of them as some of the neatest products in the flood risk database. Now, it is a struggle to get these grid-based data sets into websites, and so we're making good use of them, but not all of these grid-based products are present on the Resilience Blueprint. There are a select number of these that can be found on there. But just know the depth grids, we're making use of them by plugging in the information from them into, say, building footprints and so forth. But just know that the grids themselves can be downloaded from that MAP Service Center link, FEMA's MAP Service Center. And so this is just showing you an example of those depth grids, looking at the 5-year. And as I cycle up through the different frequencies that we've studied up to a more severe one, you'll see how the depth increases, but also the floodplain increases. So we go to the 5-year, and you see that the flood starts leaving the banks a little bit more, floodplain starts leaving the banks more. The depth's increasing as we go to the 25-year, the 50, the 100, and the 500. So we're so used to talking about water surface elevations for when it comes to flood insurance rate maps, but these can be more useful for communicating to homeowners, giving them better perspective of what that water surface really looks like in terms of depth, something that they can better understand. So this is an example of the water surface elevation grids, and this is just showing an example of the 1%, but generally these tend to look the same, where you have a smooth transition of water surface elevation from the upstream to the downstream, and not a lot of characteristic. The depth grids are a little bit more interesting to to look at because they're accounting for the changes in terrain as well as water surface elevation. So those could be used for quite a few emergency services, community assets, and operations activities. They can be used to help inform capital improvement plans, looking at your structure inventory and the overtopping of flooding and assessing the depth of overtopping. If you have a pretty low-lying area community, it might help with determining the need to elevate future roadways. If you've got a lot of overtop structures, maybe there's a need to have some sort of a plan to make sure that your structures are clear from debris and sedimentation. It's important to note that when we model our structures in detailed study areas, that we have to model these as if they're open. And so when they become clogged, it makes matters worse upstream and creating a sort of dam sort of situation. Also, looking at the sewage systems that are in and around the floodplain, making sure they're properly sealed where necessary. If you have well heads, electrical equipment, or motor control units, making sure that those are elevated and protected from the base flood elevation. And so that brings us to our next viewer, which is the Georgia Inundated Structures dashboard. And for this one, we'll go to Athens, Clarke, and incorporated areas. And so what you see offhand initially are the flood hazard areas, and then a bunch of points representing culverts that are overtopped. And what you can do is you can pull out the legend here and see what the symbologies correlate to. They also correlate to these values over on the right. And you can cycle through the various flood frequencies that we've studied, and the information is adjusting depending on what's over top for culverts in this column to give you a summary of how many structures in each of these severity classifications are being overtopped. And then we have the same for building footprints. The building footprints are a little bit less obvious because they're not a point symbology like the culverts, but I'll zoom in so you can better see those. Yeah, so here we've got a good collection of building footprints that are shown, color-coded according to these different classifications. And as we adjust down to different frequency results, you see the floodplain is adjusting, and then the building stock is also adjusting depending on what's impacted. And we always keep an outline of the 100-year on for reference, so that outline should correlate when you hit the 100-year. But as we cycle down, you get less and less. And then on the far right, you have summary tables. These tables are listing, depending on what's overtopped or inundated by the various events. It's a summary of those different structures, both culverts and then the building footprints. And so you can click on these entries and it will drive you to their location. Let's go to, and if you wanted to see a better view, you can turn on the imagery and get a better idea for what's going on. And then you can click on the building footprint and you get some summary information about the depths impacting the structure for the different frequencies that we've studied. All right. So for the water surface elevation grids, these are also very easy to access and access through two particular viewers by using the cross sections. And so one of those is the changes since last firm viewer that we've already discussed, where once you've zoomed into a particular area, those cross sections should show up on the changes since last firm viewer. They're labeled with 100-year elevation. And then as you click on them, you can get the water surface elevation for the different frequencies that we studied. And then the future condition story map Sometimes this one's a little quirky in terms of how it shows up, but it's behaving for me now. But if it's not showing up immediately, if you hit the refresh a couple times, it tends to pop up, and you can see how we're starting to lay the groundwork for Withlacoochee down here. We're doing a little bit of testing on this, but we have a base level approach for future conditions analysis for Georgia, where we're using this US EPA ICLUS data and projecting out imperviousness out to 2050, and using that to do future conditions analysis. And so as you zoom in on the Oconee watershed, where we currently have data, and we'll zoom into this particular area here, what you see is the future conditions in light blue compared to, which is a 1% analysis, 1% future conditions analysis. And then we have the existing conditions 1% analysis, which is the special flood hazard area 1% 100-year analysis. So you can see those by comparison. In more rural areas, we're doing more of a screening initially to see if there would be much difference in the flow between the existing and future. And so we may not necessarily be creating this for more rural watersheds, or the result would be matching more closely. But what you can see here is the existing and future water surface elevations. And when you click on a cross section, again, you can get the water surface elevation for the different events. And then it's likewise trying to highlight the parcels and building footprints that are being impacted by that future conditions. All right, so next we have the probability grids. So there's a percent chance of flooding grid, which is the probability of flooding in any given year. And then we have a percent chance of flooding over 30 years. And so when you've defined it, when you've given it the probability of flooding a defined number of years, in this case, it tends to be a higher probability that gets represented than any given year. The 30-year is useful for communicating to homeowners who may have a 30-year mortgage. That gives them better perspective of the chance of flooding over that mortgage period. And so to support these two data sets, we have a flood probability viewer. And I will go ahead and go to it. All right, so we're going to take a look at Gwinnett. Now, Gwinnett is only partially in the Oconee watershed, but there's an update that I want to make the counties a little bit more bold on this, but I know I can kind of faintly see the county, and I know that the Oconee watershed is over here on the right. And so as we zoom in on Gwinnett County, we'll take a look at this area in particular. What we're getting are the buildings in the floodplain in general, all the frequencies that we've studied. And those are highlighted bright, so they're hopefully more eye-catching. And then we start with the 30-year probability grid. Now you can click on the building footprint itself and get the water surface elevation and the probability of flooding from the attributes there. Oh, this is the cross sections. Here we go. Yeah, so you can get the depth of flooding for the different frequencies of the building footprint, and then the probability of flooding as well. So up here, we've got a layer list. So we can turn off the 30-year probability grid, and we could turn on the percent annual chance grid and see it. And then special to Georgia, new to Georgia, is this 15-year probability grid. And so we can turn that on in case somebody has a 15-year mortgage or 15 years left on their mortgage, that they could look at it from that perspective. And then we also have this probability-based floodplain. So you have to turn that on. It is intentional, and it correlates with this little dialog up at the upper left, as well as this table and the statistic total here. It is defaulted to the 5-year results, but what you can do is cycle through any value between our studied frequencies, from the 5-year being the lowest frequency that we studied all the way up to the 500-year. So you could go to the 10, and we do have standard frequencies that we studied: the 5, 10, 25, 50, 100, 500, and then a couple other variations so to speak. But you're not limited to just those. You can pick anything you want. Say you wanted to go to, as long as it's in a 5-year increment. So you could pick the 75-year, and you could pick the 200-year and take a look at that. And the table is dynamically updating based on what's impacted by that result, as well as that probability-based floodplain is updating as you do it, and then the total as well. So let's go back to, we'll pick the 50-year, and you'll see that everything kind of reduced. And then this table is also interactive, where you can click on it and it'll drive you to that particular building location so you can get a better look of the situation. So this is one of the few places we're making use of the grids, and as a result, it is a little bit sluggish at times, but if you kind of zoom in tight and give it a minute, it tends to all come up. Right, so next we have a set of freeboard products, data sets. So most communities in the past have traditionally been given this 3-foot freeboard grid. With more recent areas, we've been also delivering a 3-foot freeboard polygon set, which is easier to select out parcels and building footprints that are impacted by these freeboard. This is looking at if you have the base flood elevation, where is the flooding going to go if you have an additional 1 foot, 2 feet, or 3 feet above that base flood elevation. The grid-based product pairs well with the grids, and then the polygons are more useful for selecting out data. And so for that, we have a freeboard dashboard. So we'll go to it. And we will look at Hall County. So all of these are pretty much the same, where you want to start by selecting your community filters. And that kind of sets the tone for what you're looking at. So we've selected Hall County and incorporated areas. And what we're getting are some statistics here where, excuse me, this top little table is giving you the number of buildings located in the +1, +2, +3 area, as well as the straight SFHA, special flood hazard area. So you're getting building counts from the building footprints there. And then here you're getting a comparison of the parcels that are impacted by those different freeboard scenarios. And you're getting a picture of what's impacted that's undeveloped versus currently developed. So we'll go ahead and zoom in on the data. And it defaults to showing you your special flood hazard area. But if over here on the upper left, you click on these little buttons, you can increase it to see what it looks like if you have that additional foot, 2 feet, or 3 feet of flooding. So you see how it expanded out there. Let's see if I can find, as it is making those adjustments, showing you that that freeboard, the additional freeboard scenario, it is filtering the building footprints and the parcels that are being shown as well in the map viewer. All right. Then we have our risk assessment data set, and this is where we take our depth grid results and we plug them into an application known as HAZUS. It's a FEMA application that applies depth damage curves to those grids and applies those depth damage curves to census blocks or building footprints. The base level package uses the census blocks, and then we, for Georgia, input building footprints to get a more refined result at the property level. And this has given you the loss statistics for the different frequencies that we've studied. What's the dollar value for the losses for the building and contents for, say, the 1% annual chance event or 100-year event. And for this, we've got a flood loss dashboard. And so we'll find that across the top. And we will look at Gwinnett again, and not trying to pick on any communities at all, but trying to find areas where hop around to different areas, but also find areas where there's interesting data to look at. So you have the pick event box down here at the lower left, and what it is going to do is filter through the results based on the losses for the different frequencies. And so you'll see the census block losses change as we cycle, but also the individual building footprint losses change as well. And on the right, you can see the color coding associated with the loss information. So for the census block, we're showing dollar value losses. For the building specific losses, we're just giving a percentage. Just try not to put that the dollar values out in the public, but those dollar values are also available for these building footprints in the flood risk database. And then we've got some summary information on the left and top. So you're getting the average loss for the site-specific assessment, those building footprint assessments, and then average loss at the census block level. And that's for comparative purposes. Up across the top, you've got so we've got the 500-year event chosen. So we're getting all these statistics for that particular event. And so we have site specific damage estimates for that 500-year event where we have results, 236,000. And then we've got the total census block losses, which are 23 million. So it shows you a bit of a disparity between the two, the site specific and the census block. And so the real sort of probable loss would probably fall somewhere between these two values. So it's good to have that kind of a range. And then we have the average annualized loss, how much is going to be lost annually. And that is also calculated from the census block information. Oh, and then we have down here at the lower right, we have a table of the building footprints and the percent organized by the percent loss. And you can click on these and it will take you to those properties. And again, you can use the base map adjustment to look at that in aerial imagery. All right. So as you consider using these data sets, it's always good to kind of put them in the context of how they can inform any community rating system activities that you may have ongoing. CRS is a program instituted by the NFIP that rewards communities for going above and beyond the minimum NFIP standards. Currently, there are around 50 communities participating in Georgia. As you do different activities, as long as you're tracking them correctly, you get points awarded to your community, which translate to reductions in flood insurance premiums in your community. Currently, those 50 some odd communities in Georgia are saving a total of around $6 million. So it does translate to some good savings. And then per policy, there's around $80 savings. So we hope that some of these products can help with navigating some CRS activities, but it's very much dependent on how you're using this information. It's not that just that it exists that you can get credit through CRS, but we've got a couple of additional dashboards to help with that. The first is our CRS statistics dashboard, which gives some very high-level statistical information for the various communities where we have results. Now, typically, you're for these kind of statistics, you would want to have your entire community available. Unfortunately, that it has the Resilience Blueprint has limited coverage for that Oconee watershed, but there are a couple of communities where in counties that had full coverage in here. So Oconee County is practically countywide coverage, and so we'll look at it. And what it is doing is giving you counts for buildings in the different flood zones and the floodway and the 1%, the 500-year, the future conditions. It is also trying to summarize that information over here, as well as acreage of those different flood zones in your community. As you zoom in, you can take a look at those different properties that are impacted, and you've got your legend information here. So again, this isn't going to get you CRS credit, but hopefully over time, we hope that it's going to support communities with getting those high-level statistics that they need for CRS. And then also we have a soil map viewer. Again, this isn't something that's going to get you CRS points, but I think that is a bit of a prerequisite prerequisite for CRS participation, that you have a soil map for your community. And so we put together a soil map viewer for that. So we'll go ahead and pivot over to that. So hopefully this works for every community in the state. It is one where we have statewide coverage. When you first go to it, you see these different HUC 8 watersheds. And if you click on one, you can download the soil data as well as a prepackaged ArcGIS Pro project to go with it, where you can access that soil data for your community and make your own map if you want, but also you can zoom anywhere in the state. And as you zoom in close enough, you can get the soil map information, the soil types for the entire state. This is going to be finicky on me in this moment, but we'll pan over to where the data is showing. It should be over there too. There we go. It's just a little slow to load. Now, it's not just the soil types that we have. If you go to the layer list down here, you can switch out. We've got a couple of additional soil based layers. We've got the hydric classification, which can be seen here. We've got the soil hydrologic groups, help you with assessing imperviousness based on soil types. And then we've got erosion class here. Sorry, I was just looking at a question in the chat box. There's a question that says CRS, the CRS communities that I just mentioned, is this statewide or just what you've covered in the dashboard? So I think that's referring to this table. This is statewide. So there's roughly 50 communities across the state that are participating in CRS. And this is kind of the breakdown of the different classes. So 5 communities in class 5, 6, 15 in class 6, and so on. So most of the communities participating in CRS range from 5 to 9. Now, as far as the CRS statistic information, that is limited to the communities in the Oconee watershed. So if I zoom out, you can kind of see the coverage. And so the communities, the counties that are on the fringe aren't going to have as full coverage. They'll just have what's in that Oconee watershed currently. And then the soil map viewer is one of the few that is actually statewide. This information was just a little bit more readily available to post up statewide. So hopefully that answers your question, but we'll have hopefully time at the end to take on more questions. So we'll keep trucking. These flood risk products can be used for any number of public education and awareness activities, trying to use them or the resilience blueprint at public meetings, and to provide additional information at informational booths, at public events. If you have local websites that have flood information, it would be good to have links to georgiadfirm.com or the resilience blueprint for your constituents to access these data sets and interact with them. There is one way where you can easily directly use the resilience blueprint for CRS credit, as long as you're tracking it correctly. So CRS gives you credit for doing targeted outreach to subsets of your community that aren't just in the SFHA, ones that are at otherwise at a particular level of risk. And so you can use the changes since last firm dashboard to hone in on those subsets of your community that maybe had a reduction in the flood hazard area, and let them know that while they're removed and the mandatory purchase requirement for flood insurance has been removed, that there's still some level of risk, and they may want to maintain flood insurance to protect their investment and assets in the future. And then also as part of risk map, we're creating 500-year analysis, for the entire project area that we're studying. A lot of times for old effective zone A, you only had the 100-year boundary. And so for zone A on these newly revised areas, you'll have that 500 boundary, which is considered moderate risk. So you could conduct targeted outreach activities for parts of your population that are in that 500-year moderate floodplain. And then we have high hazard dams where maybe you have neighborhoods that are outside of the special flood hazard area, but downstream of a dam, trying to communicate the risk to those citizens. And to help with that in particular, we have an approximate dam inundation viewer or dashboard. And it is important to note that this is approximated information. As part of our risk map projects, we usually do a handful of two of dam breach modeling. And so you can see those locations where we perform that approximated dam breach analysis highlighted on the screen. Again, you would want to filter on your community. So show Clark, and I think it's Deckle Lake Dam. And so as you select a community, it filters the dams that are available, and then you can select on those, and it'll drive you to those dam locations. And what it is doing is showing you the pool for the lake. I'll turn on the aerial imagery from our analysis, and then the breach scenario downstream in red. And so you can see where that goes and zoom around. It's also calling out any building footprints that are in that breached area. And so what we've got down here is a table that's showing a list of those building footprints. So you may not necessarily see them initially, but they are listed here. You can click on them and it'll drive you to those locations. And this is showing you the percent of damage from the approximated breach analysis. And so if we zoom in on this, it looks like it's more of a business, maybe a gas station. But that could be a good business owner to communicate the flood risks to, and encourage them to maintain flood insurance. And then we have some high-level information about the analysis. It is typically a sunny day failure that we're modeling. And then there is a link to the U.S. Army Corps Engineers Dam website that should drive you to the specific dam. If they have information available. When I was trying this before, it seemed like the Army Corps website was a little slow to load, so we'll keep trucking, but or maybe that structure they don't have there. I'm not really sure, but yeah, we'll keep moving all the same. And then the last viewer is not one of the Resilience Blueprint viewers, but certainly deserves a plug in this, is Georgia's Advanced Flood Risk viewer. And so this has been around for many years, so hopefully you all have seen it. This contains the regulatory flood risk information for the effective products across the entire state. It also has change information shown when we're going through a revision and we get to the preliminary stage of a project. And then from this, you can generate a flood risk snapshot, generating a customized flood risk map for an individual property. This is available statewide. The information that can get pulled from this may vary a little bit. So in certain areas, quite a few areas, we have the base flood elevation plugged in, so you can get that. And then a relatively smaller subset of areas, we have the probability, general probability of flooding, and then a couple select depth scenarios plugged into it. So hopefully you all are fairly familiar. You can jump to the to this flood risk snapshot at the homepage of georgiadfirm.com, but you can also access it through the advanced risk map viewer. And then we used to have a separate model search and download site that has very recently been integrated into this advanced map viewer. And so we don't have all the models across the state, but we have quite a few of them. There's actually quite a lot that we do have plugged into this across the state. And so if you need an effective FEMA model in Georgia, this should be your first go-to place to check and see if it's downloadable. And it will tell you, there's a note that'll tell you if you need to go to the FEMA engineering library when it's not available. And so those models, having access to those are helpful for any number of mitigation activities in your communities, helping to assess culvert improvement projects, stream restoration, scour analysis, erosion analysis, dam breach analysis could lay the basis for quite a few different mitigation activities. And so I'm going to go ahead and back on camera and open it up for questions. And I've got some resource links on the right for you to help. All right, go ahead, Emily.
We did have a question. Is there a way to look at the effects of a clogged culvert?
There is, so you can simulate it in the model. So as an example, if you have one of the affected HEC-RES models, assuming it's available from here, or or you've gotten it from FEMA's engineering library, you can kind of simulate that in the model. So you can take a copy of it and adjust the model pertinence to simulate what the effects would be from that.
And quite a few people wanted to make sure that they understood how to get to this wonderful resource. Would you take us through georgiadfirm.com? Again, the link is also in the chat for those of you who can scroll through that very quickly, but just for the folks who don't have chat, if you'd show them again.
Sure, absolutely. So once you go to georgiadfirm.com, there is I've kind of bypassed, there's a little warning message that pops up. You just kind of check and hit OK on that. But this is the homepage for georgiadfirm.com. It's broken up by property owner, community official, and DNR program officials, which are more or less the same, those last two. But you would want to go to community officials. And then from community officials, you have this data information portal. And so this data information portal is where we're housing a lot of GIS-based, our GIS online-based resources and content. And so there's more going on in here, but if you just scroll down slightly to the program gallery, you've got a resilience and mitigation program gallery. You can click on that. And the resilience blueprint is here. Now it's embedded in the web page, but you can interact with it here all the same, and it's just the same sort of interaction. So if we go to the changes since last firm dashboard, you see that embedded, there's the little Foursquare and the tabbed navigation at the top, so you can backtrack through there. If it's compressed in this site, we wanted you to be able to open it in a sort of full screen mode. And so you can click the banner at the top, and that pops it out into a new tab and gives you a little bit better viewing area.
Okay, I don't see other new questions. But I just oh, wait a minute, one more. Can a community export an address list for dam inundation structures?
That's a really good question. We don't have that ability currently, but it's something that I think we'll be on the lookout for if we can add that, because there's a bunch of places where we're getting those filtered tables where it would be great to be able to export that information. So currently we don't. I think it's kind of a limitation, but that's something that we'll be on the lookout that we might be able to add that accessibility in the future. But I will say that all of the data that is on these various map viewers, it can be downloaded from the flood risk database from FEMA's MAP Service Center.
Okay, great. Where do you get the hydraulic data?
The hydraulic data is, as we go through our risk map projects, we basically restudy it. So it's limited to where we've restudied. A lot of our watershed based projects, we're studying most of the streams in the watershed. Well, most of the streams that already had flood risk information assessed on FEMA's regulatory products. But yeah, that's something that for the state, Dewberry and Atkins are doing the hydrologic and hydraulic modeling, and then mapping the result, and then using that information to update the regulatory and non-regulatory products.
Okay. We also had a person say that I didn't see my CRS community on the list. Are they not all included in the data?
They're not. As far as the CRS statistics,
Yes.
so yeah, unfortunately they're not. Let me see if I can get up to where
It's
we
just
have
the
coverage.
Upper Oconee.
Yeah, it's just the Upper Oconee watershed that currently has coverage. And we'll be looking to add additional areas where we can, but it's going to take a little bit of time to do that. So yeah, so if your community falls in here in these dark blue areas, those are the areas where we've most recently updated and rolled out the resilience blueprint, and soon we'll be rolling it out for the Little and Withlacoochee watersheds down here. So that's probably going to be hopefully around summertime. We're already kind of trying to lay the groundwork for that data. After that would be Lower Flint. That's probably a couple years down the road. And then the surrounding light green would be after that. Actually, I think Upper Hiwassee, Hiwassee and Upper Little Tennessee should be similar to Lower Flint, where probably in a year or two they'll start seeing that information as well. And when it's rolled out to a new community, we'll be coming out to your communities and holding resilience meetings to introduce it.
And we had someone ask, are the risk map updates key to the expanding the blueprint or blueprint to the other areas of the state? And I think you already answered that. Yes.
Yeah.
And we had a question about the HEC studies. Walter, if you'll put your email in the chat, we'll get back to you on that because we need to wrap this up. I do appreciate everyone. Thank you, Jarrett, for that very informative webinar. We are going to keep the chat open for a few more minutes, so you can still throw your questions in there. Just please be sure to put your email address so we can follow up with you. Everybody, if you'll mark May 3rd from 12 to 1 on your calendar for our next Lunch and Learn webinar, Alicia Schoenig with GMA will be presenting hazard mitigation application development for hazard mitigation assistance. The presentation will have information on the eligibility, projects, and what information is needed for a successful application to be submitted to FEMA. All right, please make note of the survey in the chat. And on the screen. Again, we greatly appreciate you completing the survey so that we may improve these webinars. We are offering one continuing education credit for today's session, available only to certified floodplain managers that completed the polling questions and provide us their name and email in the chat now. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. If you requested continuing education credits, those certificates will be emailed separately. Once again, our next Lunch and Learn is scheduled for May 3rd, and the registration link will be on the screen. If you miss it, don't worry. The invitation will be going out as well. Thank you again for attending today's event. For those who don't have any questions, this ends our Lunch and Learn webinar. Have a great day, everybody. And remember to put your email in for your name and email.